welcome back to the show. We are here with one half of the Frog Brothers. I can't even believe this right now, because if anybody's watching this show knows on how big of a Lostboys fan I am. But we are here with the one and only Jamison Newlander. Man, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's a nice intro. I'm glad to hear you're such a big Lostboys fan. That's great.
Oh man, it's literally been, it's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, horror movie of all time. I think it just encapsulates like everything 80s. You know, being a young kid around that time, I could really like relate to you guys, you know, being a little kid. And you know, this happened for a weird reason. I just had Greg Nicotero on like a week and a half ago, and it was a weird reason how that happened. And I feel like this is a very similar reason how this kind of came about, because I had posted something on social media and you chimed into the comments about what I posted.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was like, wow, you know what? Like, if we can get this in a discussion, let's do it, because this is a question that I've had with friends for like maybe the last couple of years, and I really didn't know an answer. And it seemed like you kind of had a little bit of backstory on this. But what I'm talking about is I just picked up this throw blanket from Spirit Halloween. Now, when you see something Lostboys out in the wild, I try to get it, because I feel like it doesn't get a lot of like mainstream things like toys and, you know, little props and stuff like out in like stores. You just don't see it anymore. They had some NECA figures back in the day of a couple characters, but not much. So when I saw this, I was like, oh man, a Lostboys, you know, blanket from Spirit Halloween, I'll get it. And I posted it. And when I got home, I kind of unwrapped it and I was like, you got to be kidding me, because it is like a lot of Lostboys things now, if you guys kind of see this. But if you know the poster, there's something missing here. There's something missing here on the side, and it is Billy Wirth and Brooke McCarter are absent from this photo. And I have friends and people who have Lostboys posters hanging in their house, and when they do a video and they scroll by, I'm like, wait a minute, that's why are they gone? Like, what's the story on this?
Right, totally. Yeah. And so I mean, the first time I saw that was at and I mean, or the first time I noticed it was when I went to Atlanta's Fantasy World, the comic book store in Santa Cruz, where we filmed. I mean, it's not exactly where we filmed, but it's the same store. And Joe pointed it out, the head of that, you know, the owner of that the comic book store, who was also in the movie, by the way. I don't know if you know that little bit of trivia. And so he pointed that out, and I was like, wow, that's weird. And I asked Billy about it. You know, and he had no memory of, you know, he has no reason, like he had no idea what was going on. And so I think that, so from there, I think we just assumed that it's something about that they contacted them for, you know, I can't imagine that anybody's like, you know what, it's better this way. You know, I can't imagine anybody saying that. Right. So I obviously it's some sort of, you know, maybe early on they put a thing in, they have to get, you know, they can only have certain number of, you know, posters printed with, you know, with those guys on it, you know, and maybe they thought that was a clever move. Maybe the agent put that in and was like, so you have to get paid. But then it also meant that they had to get contacted and they had to sign off. You know, these are all kind of assumptions based on talking to Billy and stuff, you know.
Right. I mean, it's almost kind of backfired in a way too. I mean, you can imagine the Brooke thing, right? Because I don't know how that all works now. Like who's in charge of what happens with him, you know. But the Billy thing is wild to me, because he's still out there like doing Lostboys stuff. And imagine bringing this poster up to him to sign, and he's not even on the thing anymore. You know, it's so crazy. And it's just so wild that he doesn't remember like any situation where they would have like contacted him or whatever. And all of a sudden now they're reprinting all these posters and putting these blankets out at Spirit. And he's like, oh, cool, a blanket. And now he's nowhere to be found on the thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, so I think there's a couple solutions here that I think, you know, we can pursue. Number one is I as I mentioned, I think in that same post, that same stream of comments, is that that I think he should have little things of him that you can just paste onto the poster. You know, when you get a poster without Billy, you know, that you can just put it in, you know. You'd have to have it in different sizes, unfortunately.
But you wonder like who he would have to contact if he's like, can you guys put me back on all the new material coming out? Because like
well,
would it be Warner?
I think it should be a pursuit. It should be a crowd pursuit. I think there should be a groundswell of like, put Billy back on the poster, put, kind of thing.
100%, man. I mean, we can
right?
start that here now. I'm down to get this back on here because
Let's
I just feel bad for the guy. And even still, like, you look at it too, and it just looks so empty. Like it just doesn't look right. You just got Corey's head just kind of sitting there with Alex, and it's like just in an empty spot. And at that point, I'm kind of like, damn, like you should make a little cutout of you that you can stick on the
I was
thing.
just thinking that. I was just thinking that. Yeah. I'm like, look, it's open season,
it is kind of strange though that you and Feldman on that at all. Was there a reason behind that? Did you take shots for maybe being on that?
It's funny because I was bummed about that because basically everybody was on there except for us. And I didn't think about it that much. I didn't think I'd be signing posters years later. That I think I missed out on some of the signing because I'm not on it. But I still sign posters. People still want my autograph on it. But I think that what I've heard, the most I've heard about it is from Feldman, that he said that when he saw the artwork, he was like, okay, cool. Looking for his picture, and then he was like, okay, Joel, guess what? I'm not on the poster, Right. And Joel apparently said to Corey, that's because if you were on the poster, if you guys were on the poster, they would know that you're the vampire hunters, and we don't want them to know that
I get you.
Right away. And I think that's possibly why they did it. It's also possible that they were just like, it's too many people with them on it, that it's like you put Feldman on it, you have to put me on it, and that's and it's like that. Maybe that's the story that Joel told.
Well, you know what? I mean, I guess it could kind of make sense in a way because when you think about it, neither is Edward Herman, and that kind of would have been a little bit of a spoiler too if he was throwing on that thing. And it's like Edward Herman's was a big name to not have on there. I mean, you could have sold it, with these bigger actors and actresses on this image as well. So it is just kind of funny. I always did think it was a little bit weird that you and Feldman weren't on it, even when I got the poster for the first time. And like you said, you are signing posters. I have a poster signed with your name on it. I had met you at Monster Mania a long time ago, and you had signed it up. So I do have your name on there. I actually have everybody's name on there except for Chance, who I did meet at one point, but I didn't have the poster at the time. So I keep looking to see he's got to come around here again. Like,
where are you?
I'm in Northeast, so Rhode Island. So I mean, I hit up New Jersey, Massachusetts, all those conventions around that area.
We're gonna be in Louisville. Lexington, Kentucky, in a couple weeks.
Scarefest, right?
Yeah, and then he's also gonna be then at what's the one in Orlando that I can't go to because I just went to another one in Orlando.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. It's a big one down there, right?
Yeah. Spooky Empire.
Yes.
Yeah,
we got to get you guys back up here. Silver Scream Con's the big one now up here, and Jason Patrick was supposed to be there this year and canceled. So I mean, we gotta maybe get a Lostboys thing going up this way.
I totally agree. So Silver Scream, that's the one. When is that one?
That just happened. So it's probably every September up here in Massachusetts. It's new. It's only on year 4. This is like the last 2 years have been huge. But really? Yeah, definitely. If they're planning on bringing Jason back next year because he missed this year, it would be a perfect opportunity to get everybody together. I think it would have been really
totally cool. So it's cool because it's like sometimes he does shows with Kiefer, they're close and that's a fun thing. And sometimes he does shows with sometimes Jason does shows with just the other Lostboys, right? Like Kiefer, Alex, and Billy. Which is cool and everything, except I get left out of those. No, but at the same time, I do stuff with Feldman that they don't.
Sure. So that's an interesting. This is a great segue right now, and because again, this is something else I want to talk to you about too. Yeah. Is so the first time I had met you, there was a Lostboys reunion. This is going back to probably 2008, maybe 2009. Yeah. It was in New Jersey at Monster Mania. It was early. Totally.
Yeah. With
Haim was there.
Yeah, those are the golden times. Those are great.
Right. But what was interesting was at that time, and I'm curious to see if you have a story behind this, Haim and Feldman were not getting along because they were separated through the whole convention. Haim was over here. Feldman was up in a room. You guys did panels. You were with Feldman. Haim was with the other guys. And there was never a point where you all kind of mixed together. And I always was kind of bummed out about that. But then I wasn't sure, was that real or was that because they were in the middle of the seasons of the 2 Corey show that they played it off like they were at odds because the new season was coming out? Do you have any backstory on was that a legit, I don't want to be anywhere near this guy right now? Or the new season's
Yeah.
coming out. We've got to kind of keep in the character or something here.
No, I think at that point they're frenemies. They were frenemies,
Right.
and at that point they were on the outs. So we did 2 of those with Haim, and 2 of the Monster Manias with Haim and Feldman within a couple of years of each other. And the first one, we were all just partying together. It was great. That was like the second one we ever did, all of us. And then then there was then it started to arise. They were working together, getting on each other's nerves. They're pretty different in a lot of ways, Haim and Feldman. So yeah, and then like Brooke and Chance and maybe G if he was there.
He was, yep.
Yeah, they were with Haim, and then I was with Feldman. So it's like it's fun. It's like I'm a child of divorced parents. So,
sure.
So I know what it's like to kind of play both sides and just try to get along with everybody. But yeah, there's some tensions. There's some tensions now too among cast members. Doing conventions and things like that. Just people with, there's people who are talented in that way often have big personalities.
Sure. I mean, I can kind of tell because I see, who's where, and it always seems like there's always a few people that aren't there when other people are there. So I kind of have an idea of that stuff, which is unfortunate. And like you said, you're kind of like in a weird position because, you're a Frog brother, so you've got to be with Feldman, and at the same time it's like, well, if they're doing a reunion, like I would love to be part of it too, and totally. And I get it. So it is kind of a tough thing, and you had it right on the nose with the being the kid of a divorced parents, right? And I'm a huge Corey Haim fan, like I always have been, like, and I know that you guys were friendly. I know that you guys had a friendship, and how deep was that after Lostboys? Did you guys stay in touch? Was it, I remember you were on the 2 Coreys when you guys were planning on maybe doing the sequel. And how far did you guys go back? And did you end up staying in touch after the movie?
Yeah, okay. So both me and both Coreys individually and then also together became really close that summer. We just were working together. We really got along. We were, about the same age, and we were just like, we're having a blast, I think, together. I was having a blast hanging with them because, they're a lot of fun, the Coreys. I'm right now, I'm in the process of putting together a one-man show about called Summer of '86, about that time, because it was just really so magical and, and so amazing. And I just started considering having that go up in New York right around the time the musical's going up, so we'll see if I can do that. We'll see if I can get that together. But it's, so we became really close. And so with me and Haim, the problem with me, and I think probably with a lot of people, but, is like, we were working so intensely together. And then after that summer, I went back to high school, and they went back to being stars, like, and, right. And I was still kind of trying to be a star and auditioning for other things. And, and then the movie was, getting ready to come out and stuff. So all kinds of different things were happening. And I was in a bit of a different world than they were. And I tried to hang out with them more because I still loved them. We were close, and I tried to hang out with them more, but I didn't know how to party really. I didn't really party. I wasn't really, I was just like a kid, in high school who kind of hadn't figured that out yet, so I couldn't really hang in the way that they were hanging. And so that's kind of what happened. That's where it sort of fizzled. And then I went off to college in another year in New York. And so at that point, we weren't in touch. I wanted to be, but I was also going through a lot of different things. I mean, I was also dealing with, like, I was in this movie, and now I'm, in college, and I'm in, trying to pursue theater as well. Should I be in LA? And, these guys, and what are they up to? And they're doing License to Drive, and I should be doing License to Drive with them, or, all that kind of stuff. And come to find out, by the way, that Feldman was reminiscing about a time they were hanging out on set in License to Drive, and they were like, "Where's Jamison? Why isn't Jamison in this?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, you should have called me. I would have come out."
Well, was that must have been hard for you as a kid, because like you said, like you went back to kind of a little more of a normal life. Like, okay, here's the track I'm going to go on. These guys are doing a different track than me. And in your head, you're thinking, I know I need to do this because I'm still a kid, but I want to be doing that because that looks super fun and they're getting opportunities that maybe I would have too if I was there. That must have been really hard for you to transition from like a hit movie like that, seeing these kids around your age, you know, living that life, and you're going back to just your regular life and be like, I'm going to do this a different way. And always thinking, well, what if I stayed, or could I have stayed? Did I even have an option to stay? Right. You're still a kid. So you maybe didn't have the same, maybe even upbringing as they did, where they'd be like, yeah, you're going to stay too. And we're going to pursue this with like them. Like, it must've been hard for you.
Obviously at the time, I mean, I was still a kid. I didn't understand this, but it's like, yeah, you've got this career that's happening, that's sort of burgeoning. So what do you do with that career? Well, Lost Boys wasn't huge in the movie theater. It was good, but it was really on video that it became big. So it was like, okay, Lost Boys is good, and that was cool and everything, but why don't I go off to college in New York, study acting, do theater, still do film. You know, I was kind of, I came close on a couple of big projects, like Dead Poets Society came really close for one of those roles, you know. So it's like I was still doing it, kind of juggling all this stuff. Yeah, the expectations of where I grew up, you know, in you know, my family and everything. You went to college, like you're going to college, you know, it's like that kind of thing. And so it would be a big thing for me not to. And so, you know, then it's like the Coreys, you know, crashed and burned, you know, and it was like, okay, did I dodge that bullet? You know, would I have crashed and burned? Did I do the right thing? Did I go to, you know, pursuing a more legitimate acting career? So great, except that I get out of college and I'm nobody really cares about Alan Frog at that point, certainly not in New York and not in the theater world. And so I'm sort of built a theater career, you know, from nothing. You know what I mean? It's like from the beginning.
I get it, man. It's definitely an interesting story. And I think, like you said, that one-man show that you're going to do, kind of talking about the summer of '86 and leading up to it, I think that's really cool because, again, like you were one of the three, right? You guys were similar ages. You were coming up in Hollywood. And was there ever a point in time where like you went back home and all of a sudden License to Drive came out and you're, you know, fighting with your parents, that could have been me and I'm here? Like, did that ever come to a point? But then, like you said, later down the road, you might have been like, oh man, like I'm in a good place. If that was me, would I be in the same situation as they are? Right. So was there any of that back and forth where you kind of like had a little bit of regret, like for you having to come home and be like, I could have been with them doing, you know, License to Drive or Dream a Little Dream or whatever it may be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, it's a tapestry of regret and gratitude and, you know, all these kinds of things. It's like, you know, I was talking about this recently where like, you know, I've pursued a pretty normal life. And I also was in this movie. I've raised 2 kids. You know, I had a pretty normal job for a while, for like 16 years. I was I'm good at writing, you know, so I became a marketing writer, you know, like kind of thing. And that was really great for that period of time. I would go to work, pick up the kids, you know, I'm married, you know, like my wife and I were, you know, raising these boys, and it was like great, no paparazzi, you know, like I got to just do that. And I'm really grateful for that. And yes, I'd love to be more famous. I'd love to be able to be like that movie. I want to do it. You know, I'd love to be able to just have that kind of cachet with my name. And I'm trying to build that in a different way now. You know, still built on Lost Boys and everything. But so, you know what I mean? It's sort of tapestry 100%. You know,
but you know what though? And again, this was, I was actually kind of, you know, shocked. Like I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And it's super underrated, but like, man, all of a sudden when I'm watching Bone Tomahawk for the first time,
right.
And I see you and I'm like, whoa, like that's Jamison. And Bone Tomahawk, for anybody who hasn't seen, is a killer movie. I mean, that thing is a brutal, scary movie that I feel like doesn't even get as much love as it should have. Now, how did something like that, like you said, all those years later, come across your table and you'd be like, hell yeah, I'm doing this?
Yeah. So, around the time of Lost Boys, The Thirst, you know, like around that same time where we were doing conventions with Haim and I was on the 2 Coreys and stuff, it's when I was pursuing it again. I was like, okay, cool. You know, there was a period of time where I was like working my real job and just kind of like had a kid and I was like, cool, you know, but then I was like, you know, it's not going away. I still want to do this and I'm still good at this. And, you know, let's get this going. And so, you know, I like to say this, I like to be like, by hook and by crook, I got parts, you know, part here, part there, you know, and Bone Tomahawk was one of those. Not that I had to do that much for it, but Craig Zoller, who wrote and directed it, he and I were, friends in New York. We did this movie together called Tornado States. It was this fun little indie movie that didn't really get very far, but he's genius. He's genius, as you can see from Bone Tomahawk. That was all him, And before that, he was a DP on this movie, and then he ended up being a DP for me on my short film as well. And so we had this history where this kind of mutual admiration. I think he's brilliant, and he really liked me and stuff. So he sold a bunch of scripts, and he was like, classic Hollywood story. He was like, look, this is great, but I'm a filmmaker and I want to make something. And so Bone Tomahawk was the movie that he was like, okay, I'm going to make this one. So basically, like, Craig really knew how to get a lot for little, and he just wrote this script that a lot of people loved, including Kurt Russell. And so he signed on, and Matthew Fox and all the great actors that were in it. I was honored to get a call. It was just for that one day, and to be in that room with like those legends. There's in that saloon scene, there's like a bunch of legends, including Sean Young playing my wife, and so that was just amazing. And so it's been part of my kind of return, my sort of subtle return, like got to grab enough parts that you can actually be trusted in current time, so, and that's what's going on now. I have this kind of new shot at this, at acting, and I'm also writing, and so creating projects for myself, and with the 40th coming up, for Lostboys, just trying to make that all work together.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time, man, and it's for the fans as well, like that you can still celebrate these kind of like hits that you had throughout the years, and still be able to kind of how cool is it in a way to doing these conventions, and all of a sudden you're reunited with some of these people that you haven't seen in X amount of time. Like, this just must be overall, when you guys do these reunions, cool for the fans, cool for you guys to kind of get back together and just kind of hang out like back in the day. Like, I think it's just a really cool thing that you're kind of giving back to this movie that at the time you felt like it was just something. Okay, I guess it's pretty big. It's big, man. So it's so cool that that you've been able to kind of keep this. A lot of people will turn away. I don't want to be focused on that stuff. It's the past, but a lot of people embrace it, and I think that's super cool because, like I said, for the fans as well. And going into the sequels, which is really cool to see that you guys were kind of able to make that happen, and you get yourself back out there. Now, I had a couple questions about that because, as you guys were talking about, a lot of it was being documented on the Two Corey's show. You had showed up, you did some press for it, they were talking about it, and then obviously the whole thing happened where Haim's role wasn't what he thought it was going to be. But even to me, like I was hoping for more from him, but it's an interesting end scene because it looks like it's leading into maybe a specific sequel. And you were in the end scene as well. Like, Corey's telling Feldman, he's coming, he's on his way. Right. And you're flying down the street in that car and you're all vamped out and all this stuff. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. But then when they got into the third one, like all of that had kind of scrapped that whole, that story. Now, do you have any insight on like, what was that? Was something supposed to happen? What was the plan there? Because, you had this real cool look, like blasting the music in the car. And, I'm just curious where that was heading, if anywhere.
Yeah, it's great. So first of all, the sequels, props to them that, that they got it, that it happened and they got it made. And, I think they're good. They're good movies. It's like even the second one, which is, what I have the biggest problem with, but it's still a good movie. It's still watchable, and the people involved did a really good job. I just feel like it was a bummer after all those years to basically like bait and switch with the fans, be like, oh yeah, this is Lost Boys 2. Guess what? It's a whole different group of people. And they weren't even going to use Feldman that much at first, that he had to kind of like really argue his way, into it. And which they did successfully, to their credit, him and his manager, Scott Carlson, who was my manager at the time. And so the whole time while they're filming, they're like, oh yeah, you guys are going to be in it. You and Haim are going to be in it too. And then they're filming, and then they finish filming, and they're like, no, they're going to pick up another day. You're going to be in it. And I feel like it just was an afterthought that, it was sort of like, at the time it was like, okay, I'm happy to do this. Looking back, I think it was a little frustrating that they didn't. Well, that they didn't, number one, grasp the value of bringing people back, and that also that they didn't grasp the value of Haim, and as tricky a guy as he was, because at the time he was, he could be tricky. He was like telling off the producers, and that's part of what happened with the third movie. Is that he kind of was at odds with the producers a bit, and it's a shame on both of their parts, But I think it's sad that the producers weren't able to see beyond that and see like this is Corey Haim and he's great, and the fans want him, So anyway, that sort of segues into both.
So there was never really a plan that you were aware of where like, hey, there's going to be a third one and you're going to come back as like this like badass vampire and Haim's a vampire. Like, was that a thing, or is it just like, hey, you guys are in the movie, we'll figure this out as we go if we're going to end up doing a sequel to this or not? And then when the sequel came to the third one came out, it was like Frog Brothers are back together and just kind of going on their adventures, which, was kind of a comic book, Reign of Frogs, right? Where you guys just had all these different adventures. Sure. And I actually think there's so many cool things in those comic books that could have been a really cool sequel. They were talking about like the head vampire was like the Widow Johnson and all this stuff where like the grandpa was like vampire and like the fridge he was drinking blood in those bottles. Like there was an actual real cool wraparound that I'm like, that all would have worked great if we could have figured that out. But so when the third one came and they were like, we're going to go the Frog Brothers route, was that, and just kind of X out what they finished part 2 with, was that, how did that go? Was it just kind of like, here's what we're going to do? Corey Feldman says, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do Frog Brothers stuff and forget what we just did. Is that kind of how that went?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, so it's like this, like, I think that they were playing catch up a little bit with that second one, about like what I was talking about and trying to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we should include that and, kind of thing. And so I think it was not a fully fleshed out idea. It was like, yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah. Haim's back. And now he's warning about Alan and he's the head vampire and, but I think that all that's problematic. I think it's problematic to have me this whole different character with this long hair and everything. For me, it was anyway. I didn't feel like it was really the spirit of the original one. I was happy to do it, like whatever, the writers want to come up with, I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
But it's like, it didn't quite seem on point for me. And so I was kind of relieved that they put it in the special features. And then what happened with the second one is that, so the Tribe did pretty well because people were, they wanted Lostboys and, and it was a watchable movie. It was,
Sure.
There was some cool people in it, and everything. So, and so it did pretty well. And when it premiered at Comic-Con in San Diego, they had me down there to like help promote it and stuff. And Feldman goes like this. He goes, bring down your Frog Brothers costume, put together a Frog Brothers costume or whatever and bring it down to San Diego. And I was like, okay, cool. That's fine. Cool. Whatever. And he goes like this, we get ready for the panel. And he goes, okay, we're going to do the panel as the Frog Brothers. And I was like, come on, I don't want to take, this is, other people are in this movie, I don't want to take, but, good for him. That's Feldman. That's Feldman being bold, being like, no, we're not going to follow the rules. We're going to do it this way. And that's what got us the thirst, really, is that we went out as the Frog Brothers and really took the house down. They loved it. And we had a couple of good laughs and stuff. And it convinced the producers that the next one should be about the Frog Brothers.
That's awesome, man. It really is, because again, like you said, it took balls for him to do that. And it seems like that he really doesn't care and would do something like that to put himself, if he wants something, he'll be like, hey, we're going to do this. And I bet the people marked out because, it is iconic, right? To see you guys back together. And they probably in some way thought they would have saw that in part 2 and they didn't. So now all of a sudden, when they probably saw the people going crazy for you guys back together in the costumes, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this actually could work. We're going to kind of run with it. So now at that point, was Haim had passed when you guys started filming that, or no?
No, we filmed the whole thing and Haim was still alive. It was really awful. I mean, when I say awful, at the time it was just like, okay, I guess. I mean, they were fighting. I mean, again, like back to the divorced parents thing. Like, like what am I going to get in between? Like, Haim and the producers. Like, I'm just trying to let this project happen. I want this project to happen. So but it was sad because that was the opportunity that they didn't know was the last opportunity to have Haim in it, and it could have been great. You know, his character's still alive, you know, as far as we know, and you know, he's Haim, you know, for the difficulties that he kind of was like experiencing in the middle of his life, like still incredibly talented dude, you know, talented, charming guy, you know, which you probably saw when you met him, when you saw him.
He was very I had met him twice. He was very thankful, and he was very, you know, and hugged everybody, you know, he was very thankful to the fans, apologized a lot to people about things like, you know, I'm better now. You know, I'm back now. And, you know, he performed on stage and did the bongos and did all this stuff with Brooke, and, you know, and it seemed like everything was really good, you know, and at that time. And then it was like shortly about a year later is when he had passed. But I always was just curious on like that kind of transition, because I know they kind of talk about part 2, and, you know, it was in the 2 Coreys, but then I wasn't sure, like, as you guys were filming 3, if he was still around and where that kind of all went. But I don't know if it's just a Frog Brothers thing, but it seems like, you know, when Feldman does something, he's always bringing you along and making you part of it. Like, you know, you were in a music video, I think, right? You were like, you know, you're on the 2 Coreys. Like, so it's cool to see that you guys had maintained a friendship. I think, you were even in the Coreys movie, right? Like the little biopic thing. So it's cool to see that you guys have maintained a friendship where he knows, like, hey, I need somebody. I'm going to get Jamison out here. Like, are you guys still tight?
You know what? We are pretty tight, actually. It's a really interesting relationship because, you know, it's like from the beginning, you know, clearly it's a beneficial business relationship, you know, it always was. But it's like we were always really tight. Like when we met each other, we liked each other a lot. You know, we had a lot of fun together, and, you know, like I was saying, and then we were really tight during that time. And there was that long stretch. I was in New York. We weren't in touch at all. They were crashed and burned, and, you know, and all that. And they were like toxic Hollywood, you know, like in that phase.
You saw it all over the news, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when we got back in touch, me and Feldman, was probably like really just before, it was probably like 2000. Yeah, it was like 2002, 2003. He had just been married. He had just got married, and I had just gotten married. I think they hadn't even had Zen yet, he and Susie. And so he's so kind of goofy in the press, you know, and like the stuff with the Frog Brothers, you know, the panel thing. It's like you can be so focused on one thing, and you can be a little bit blind in other ways, you know, in certain ways. And so it's easy to think like, okay, you know, that's Corey, but I know Corey on a personal level, you know, to be so sweet and, you know, ongoing, so kind, and like always wanting to include me in things, and, you know, looking out for me. And, you know, it's like we've spent some holidays over there, you know, some Christmas Eve over there, you know, with him and his family, and me and my boys, and it's sweet. We are kind of like brothers in a way, you know. It's really it's like a genuine friendship that's not like blind to each other's, you know, flaws or whatever, but you know what I mean?
It seems like he has a core group of people that he always will kind of go to. Like, you always kind of see the same people like around, like where he is. And I don't know if it's a trust thing for him, and but obviously your relationship with him is very different than Haim's was with him, right? Like, you guys, is there points in time where you guys aren't speaking? Like, I mean, is that kind of like, is that a part of the friendship with you guys too? Or do you guys more or less like when we're around each other, we get along, and when we see each other, it's cool? Or
yeah, it's a much more low key friendship. You know, they were really intense, and then hated each other, and then, you know, all kinds of stuff. Feldman and I, when we weren't in touch, we just weren't in touch. You know, you know, and when we're, you know, these days we're both busy in lots of different ways that we're never like, oh, come on, man, we got to hang out. You know, we're just like, we hang out, we see each other, we're happy to see each other, and you know, we're much more low key.
I'm sure there's only so much I want to get into Feldman, because again, I know you guys are close, and I, you know, it's great for me to see him out there. I just went to the the tour with Limp Bizkit that he performed on.
Right,
You know,
right,
I went to that and saw that. And it's just so funny because you've got so many ends of the spectrum when it comes to him, and he's so polarizing that it's so interesting because, you know, there's part of me where I'm kind of like, is he that much of a genius where he knows exactly what he's doing at all times? Like, I just don't know what to think of him because, you know, in some ways, like you said, he can be the sweetest guy. You guys are doing holidays. It's great. And then on the other side, you're seeing all these other things and you're like, does he just know how to keep himself relevant no matter if it's whatever way possible, basically? I just don't know him to know where the real Corey is, you know, and I'm sure being a friend of his that's, you know, very on a certain level, it must be just interesting for you because you know him in a different way than what everybody sees, right? And that kind of brings me even to the last time I had met you or seen you, which I'm sure you probably don't remember, but here it is right here. This is a picture.
Fantastic. Yes.
And this was at the Chiller Theater convention like last year. And you guys did the Frog Brothers photo op together.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. I mean, I had to get this. I mean, 100%, like I had to do it. And it was super cool to see, but it was funny too, because, you know, you and I can remember vividly. I walked by your table and said, "What's up to you?" You and Corey were in that back room and there was a lot of, you know, chatter going on, being like the AC's broken, you know, people aren't happy in there. And I'm sure you probably saw, you know, Feldman was probably not, I saw the fans on him. He probably was not happy because he was all decked out in his gear. He probably was sweating to death in there. But, you know, it must just be an interesting experience to kind of be in that kind of situation, like at these conventions and stuff with him and whatnot. But do you remember any of that? Was the AC off in that room? I remember everybody was saying it was so hot in there and all this stuff. Do you remember any of that?
I mean, I don't remember that specifically. Conventions kind of run into each other. You know, my head was like, was that there or New Jersey?
This was in New Jersey at you know, and they had like a little hotel. But I will say this about Corey is that he goes all in, right? So he had a photo op thing. I think you both did. And because I was waiting in line for this one, and all of a sudden he was doing like a Ninja Turtles cast. So he had to run in for that, right? Then he comes in with like a Ninja Turtles costume on. And he's the only one in the group with the costume on. The only one. And I'm like, he's just, is he just working everybody, or is he just that dedicated to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to give him I'm Donatello. I'm going to show him. Then he leaves. Then he comes back, you and him doing some pictures with people. Then he leaves again. And then he comes back with the Frog Brother outfit on. It's just like, you know, say what you want, but I mean, the ethic of work
it's true
that he puts in for the fans is not half-assed.
No,
I mean, he didn't need to get into 3 costume changes to do all these pictures. He could have just been like, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to say that, so I don't know that I'll go so far as to say that he knows what he's doing at all times and he's, you know, playing 3D chess and like that. But I think that what is going on is that this is what he does. Like, he's been in this business since he's 2, you know, and what I like to remind myself whenever, you know, whenever things get sort of challenging with Corey, you know, sometimes at conventions, the AC can be off. He could be frustrated. Yeah, he's in full costume. He's trying to, you know, bring it for the fans, you know, so sometimes he can get frustrated like that. He's had his diva moments, you know, that I've witnessed, you know, but what I like to remind myself is that, you know, it's like he's in this business since he's 2. He's supporting his family most of that time, you know, most of his childhood he's supporting. Makes me emotional to think about it. You know, he doesn't do anything else. He never trained to do anything else. This is what he does. He's Corey Feldman. He's an actor. He's, you know, all the other pursuits that he has. And it's like, he is gotten good at this. He has gotten, like you said, staying relevant. Like, I remember when he did Surreal Life. So back during Lostboys 2, you know, during getting the tribe together, and then that show, the 2 Corey's show, that was all the result of him getting on Surreal Life. Yeah. And so I watched that happen, and I watched him sort of take hits for being goofy at times, or, you know, they you know, with a reality show, it's like, you're going to edit it, you know, he's the guy they're going to edit to make it look like, you know, goofy, or, you know, whatever you know, the Corey Feldman, like, they want the laughs, you know. And so he's okay. He manages to put himself out there in ways that take the love and the hate and put it together and help him propel to the next level, and so it's like that's a perfect example of it. Boom, he was at the next level. He was doing Lost Boys the Tribe, Lost Boys the Thirst. After Lost Boys the Tribe did well, he commanded a lot. He was one of the producers on Lost Boys the Thirst, and it's like, boom, he's moving up, and then all these projects that he's part of, so I was in Lost Boys, and I was in The Blob, and I have some other things too, from the 80s. But it's like Feldman, Lost Boys, Goonies, Gremlins, Stand By Me, License to Drive, Dream a Little Dream, Ninja Turtles, Burbs, Friday the 13th. There's even probably another one I'm not thinking of.
It's unreal, man. When there was a point in time where I looked around my movie room, like out where my TV is, and I was looking at the walls, and I'm like, oh my God, Feldman was in all these movies, because he was everywhere.
Yeah,
for all
he was
that
in
period
hit
of
after
time.
hit after hit in the 80s, and in that time walked away from it with nothing. He's again supporting his parents the whole time, supporting his family the whole time, and so like it's nice to see this where he's in demand now. He's built that from being punchline for a while. He's one of those people that ended up a punchline. Well, guess what, he built it again. And that's where I respect Feldman. And it's like he doesn't exactly know what he's doing all the time, but he is directed, like the Frog Brothers, like putting the Frog Brothers on the panel. Right. No, we're gonna do it. Mm-hmm. And another thing I think about was when I don't know if you've seen, we did this Lost Girls like spoof, pretend audition as the Lost Girls.
No,
that's the Frog Sisters.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so it's out there somewhere on YouTube. It's funny. We were just like, look, because they were trying to do a Frog Sisters thing for the, so we were like, let's pretend to dress up as girls and be Frog Sisters. It was fun, and so I was like, hey, we should do that sometime. And he was like, and I was like, cool, we'll get it. I'll write a little something. He was like, no, come on, we're doing it. We're doing it now. And that's the kind of thing. It's that kind of like fearlessness and hip shooting, that I think is where I respect Feldman.
Now, when you see things like you said, where he becomes a punchline, sometimes a meme, now that with social media, it's like, oh my God, you can't even do anything without it being a thing. And you said he's usually pretty good at taking things and trying to use it to his advantage, I guess. Do you as a friend see these things and kind of, does it bum you out, when you see these things because you know him, or do you think to yourself, he's out there, he's going to make the best of this? And like you said, he moves up though. Like, let's say his music career was kind of at a standstill for a while. Couple things happen, then all of a sudden he's on tour with Limp Bizkit. Then all of a sudden it becomes a meme, and then he's on. It's like, oh look, everybody's like, oh, he did this, he did this. Now he's on Dancing with the Stars. So like he's figuring it out, and that's why I never know. Being a huge wrestling fan, I'm not sure if I'm like, is he working this to an extent where he knows it's just going to get him elevated to the next point? But as a friend, like when you see this stuff, are you like, all right, he's going to know how to handle this and it's going to be good? Or are you kind of like, oh, what the heck? Like everybody's so nitpicky on every little thing here,
Right. I think that I think I can count on that he's going to work it to his advantage, but on a personal level, I know that he's devastated. I mean, he also, he does feel it, he does feel it when he gets this stuff. It's a really interesting thing, to watch him experience it, as a friend, to see that happen. And I see both sides of it. He is aware of, like I was just talking to him about when he was on Dancing with the Stars, he was like talking about how it brings him to a whole new level, and that's it's like, it's true. You're saying about the Limp Bizkit tour, it's like, boom, boom. And he, and on the Limp Bizkit tour, it's like, so it's called the Loserville tour,
Sure.
Right. And it's like, so he's willing to take some, okay, so, am I, to that self-deprecation of being like, Loserville tour, it takes, I think, some fortitude to be able to kind of walk that line, right?
100% to be kind of in on the joke in a way. Like even when they did this big promotion for the Loserville tour, and I know even Limp Bizkit was very heavily into like what this was going to be. And, they did this big promotion where they were introducing all the acts and they're like, oh, Corey Feldman's here. And they're like, oh my God, he's, he wants red jelly beans. He needs this and that. And, and they kind of played it, right? So then you kind of like, it's like everybody's kind of in on a joke, but it's not like, I don't look at it as like, I'm kind of laughing with them in a sense, because I'm like, they found a way to kind of create this and make this work for what it is and whatnot. And, so it was always like, was just curious about like how far, reality is blurred the lines, I'm just happy to see that he's still around. I'm happy to see he's still relevant. So it's really cool. And with you, like, again, I know that you have things coming up too. And I know there's things. When I was about to do this, this chat, I had talked to my buddy, Jason, because he said when he interviewed you, you were working on something where he goes, it was very ahead of its time, called like Wiki Soap.
Oh yeah.
So that how long ago was that conversation with, you think, with that?
So I just talked to somebody about Wiki Soap recently. That might have been on the podcast.
He runs a page, Icon versus Icon. I don't know.
Oh, Jason. Yeah. From Icon versus Icon. I remember that. Yeah. So this was a while ago, and I love that project, but it's its own sort of social media now. It's not my first project on my list anymore. It's like,
you've got things coming on. Is that one-man show something you're really going to try to focus on for the 40th anniversary? Yeah.
So I was, I've been ideating about that for a while, the one-man show. And then I realized that with the musical coming out next year, I was like, a lot of people are going to be in town for that musical, and maybe they'll also want to see this one-man show about, so I think I'm going to try to open it the same week that they, or at least do it during that time in New York.
I think that's perfect. I mean, I said before, I'm a huge wrestling fan, right? So when WrestleMania goes to Chicago, right, let's just say, all these other wrestling podcasts, all the stuff, they set up shop at these different bars in Chicago because they're like, all these fans are going to be there. So, on another day or earlier that afternoon, they're going to come see me, and then they'll go to the show. So they all do it because they know that their fan base is all going to be in that surrounding area. So
totally.
You got people that are going off to see Lostboys, and they know, hey, before the show, I can go over here and listen to Jamison tell the stories, and then I'll go to the show. Like, it makes perfect sense to me.
Totally. I love it. And I kind of just thought that in the last couple of days. And so I think I'm going to do that. And the show itself, I'm really excited about because like, I can be a bit of a showman. I'm, a theater guy. And I think this was a really cool time in my life, and a time where we're all nostalgic about this time. And, I can bring some of the music back from the time. And, for me, I'm an 80s kid. I was born in 1970. So it's like the 70s were my childhood. The 80s were my teens. The 90s were my 20s. It evens out really well. Yeah, it's great.
100%.
And so,
and that's the thing. People love stories. That's why podcasts and these different things do so well, because people love hearing these stories that, it seems like a movie when you grew up, and the things you experience and the people you've been around. And, and with this thing, if you do multiple dates, you could also, find some people to come and be like as a special guest every now and then, like, and
I
kind
totally
of incorporate them into the show. I think this is something very cool. And, I'm definitely interested in trying to hit up that Lost Boys musical when it comes around. So I don't know if they're just sticking in New York or if they're going to be traveling with that at all.
My guess is they're going to have a touring company pretty quickly after it opens. I don't know if it's like, you never know if it's going to do well, which is why I want to be there like that week that it opens, you never know with Broadway. But
if it does well for you in New York, follow it around. If it comes to Boston, I'll be there.
It's a great idea. Actually, I was thinking about doing New York, and then there's like a fringe theater festival in LA, and then maybe go to Santa Cruz and do it up there, as like right on the precipice of the 40th. If I do it on July 31st, that weekend, that's the weekend Lost Boys came out, and it's a countdown to the 40th.
And I guarantee that Boardwalk will have something for the 40th, because every year they put the movie on the beach and everybody goes as a destination. So now with the anniversary, I'm sure they're going to do some kind of big Lost Boys event. So to have something, like I said, around the corner or even on the boardwalk somewhere itself, I think would be killer, man.
Totally. I totally agree. I'm glad to hear that. I'm always happy to hear that, because I've been kind of investing time in Santa Cruz a little bit lately, last few years. And so I'm really, I really want to see if it could be a big thing, a really fun kind of festival for everybody. you know.
That's awesome, man. I hope for the best. I'm hoping it, I'll keep my eyes out. Hopefully I can catch it if you go on tour following the thing around. But man, this has been so awesome that you came on here, man. I thank you again. Never would have expected this to happen, but again, this is so cool to kind of hear these stories, and that's what you're going to be talking about on your one-man show. Yeah. So man, thank you so much, Jamison. Anything else you want to plug? Where can everybody find you right now?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram a lot. You can find me, I'm in sort of a suit, with glasses on Instagram. And so that's where I'm also on a bunch of other things that I haven't been paying that much attention to, like TikTok, and I have a YouTube channel, where I was doing a show for a little while there. And so I'm all over social. JamisonNewlander.com is kind of my home website there. And so I think that's basically, and then I'm going to be at Scarefest in Lexington on the 16th, 17th weekend. I'll also be doing, I also want to plug in San Diego on the 30th, on October 30th. There's this cool event called Vamp to the Future. These guys, the band, the Flux Capacitors, are just awesome. You know that band? They're great guys, and they put on a really good show. And so they're going to do this kind of mashup of Back to the Future and Lostboys, and I'm going to be there. G. Tom Mack, singing, is going to sing Cry Little Sister. I think I'm going to sing I Still Believe. I'm pretty sure I just checked on that. I've been singing that lately. And
you guys have got to go to that. That sounds super rad.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And guys, I know a lot of people that watch my show are going to Scarefest. So do me a favor, go see Jamison at his table and tell him you saw him on Born to Be Rad, okay?
Yeah, totally. Remind me of all that. Yeah, maybe.
But Guy, thank you so much, man. And guys, thank you for checking this out. This is Garrett at Born to Be Rad. And like always, stay